ಎಲ್ಲಿರ್ತದೆ
ಕೆಳಗಡೆ
ಇದು ಮಾಡಿದ್ರೆ ಎಲ್ಲ ಬರುತ್ತಲ್ಲ. ಓಕೆ. ಮತ್ತೆ ಎಸ್ಕೇಪ್ ಹೊಡೆದು ವಾಪಸ್ ಹೋಗ್ಬೇಕು.
ಓಪನ್ ಮಾಡಿ ಅದು ಎಂಡ್ ಆದ್ರೆ ಕ್ಲೋಸ್ ಮಾಡಿದ್ರೆ ನೆಕ್ಸ್ಟ್ ಓಪನ್.
ಇದಾಯ್ತು. ಇದು ಸ್ಲೈಡ್ ಶೋ ಮಾಡ್ತೀನಲ್ಲ, ಒಂದು ನಿಮಿಷ. ಇದಾಯ್ತು. ಈಗ ವಾಪಸ್ ಹೋಗ್ಬೇಕಂದ್ರೆ ಎಸ್ಕೇಪ್. ಮತ್ತೆ ಇಲ್ಲಿ ನೆಕ್ಸ್ಟ್ ಕಾಣಿಸುತ್ತೆ. ಓಕೆ, ಥ್ಯಾಂಕ್ ಯು. Good morning, students. Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning, ma'am.
Yeah. How many of you have joined? Still only for 50, almost. What about others? 100 people? Do you think it is possible for us to revise each and everything in offline classes? It's not possible. Hardly the main thing can be revised in offline. Otherwise we can conduct the test, make you self-study. Revising everything, that much time we will not get. Okay. I don't know why you people are not taking it seriously. Anyway, I told you that I will just revise whatever respiratory systems classes I have taken in the last 1 month, whatever I have taken. Yes or no? Okay. Now, in the beginning I told this. So what is external and internal respiration? External respiration is exchange of gases from environment to the lungs, isn't it? Internal respiration is exchange of gases from the blood to the cells, isn't it? From systemic capillaries to the cells, that is called as internal respiration. Okay, then you know all these things already. Okay, so what is upper respiratory tract? Till what I told you. And what is lower respiratory tract? Yes, up to what it is upper respiratory tract? Yes,
nose to larynx.
Up to larynx.
Larynx, yes, very good. Then from the trachea to the alveoli it is lower respiratory tract. Okay, these are the partial pressure of oxygen in different situations. Okay, so these things you don't know, but here this is very important, that is tracheobronchial tree. So up to what generation there is a conducting zone, and up to what generation it is called as respiratory zone. This is very important. This may be asked you for 3 marks or 5 marks question. Okay, so sometimes it may be asked to only draw the tracheobronchial tree for 3 marks. Okay, so this you have to practice well. So as I told you, up to 16 generation it is called as conducting zone. Okay, here it only conduct the air from lungs to the alveoli. Okay, it is just a pathway for the air. Okay, that's why it is called as conducting zone. Whereas respiratory zone, here the exchange of gases takes place, even though the exchange occurs maximally in the alveoli. Okay, but some amount of respiration begins from the some amount of exchange of gases begins from respiratory bronchioles, that is from 17th, 18th, 19th generation. Okay, some amount of exchange begins from here, but almost maximum exchange occurs in alveoli. Okay, so this you must remember very much. And here you must know one more thing is dead space. So whatever air is there up to 16 generation, that is in conducting zone, this is called as anatomical dead space. Okay, and the volume of that is 150 ml. Okay, so in health means if the person is healthy, the anatomical dead space should be equal to the physiological dead space. Okay, total dead space in a person, in a lungs should be 150, then the lungs are totally all right. But if there is a physiological, apart from this 150 ml anatomical dead space, if there is some dead space or some amount of gaseous exchange is not occurring here because of either the obstruction to the airway or obstruction to the blood flow, if the exchange is not occurring here, then that is also considered as physiological dead space, isn't it? So if apart from this 150 ml anatomical dead space, if there is some physiological dead space, then there is a pathology in the lung. Okay, either there is obstruction to circulation, or there is obstruction to the airway, or there is a thickening of alveolo-capillary membrane. As I told you, alveolo-capillary membrane is very thin, isn't it? Around 0.5 micron. So because of any diseases, if it is thick and gaseous exchange will not occur properly. Okay, so all these cases you will get the physiological dead space. In health, there will not be any physiological dead space. Okay, so this diagram you are supposed to practice. Next, this is the same thing. Then what is pleural cavity? So pleural cavity, you know that our lung is covered by two layers, isn't it? That is the visceral pleura and parietal pleura. Visceral pleura is attached to the lungs, whereas parietal pleura is attached to the chest wall. Okay, in between these two pleural layers, there is a cavity that is called as pleural cavity, and small amount of fluid, that is 10 to 20 ml of fluid, is always present in this pleural cavity, and always the pressure in the pleural cavity, that is intrapleural pressure, is always negative. Okay, so it must be always negative, then only our lungs can expand properly. So it is -2 at rest, that is at the end of expiration, and at deep inspiration it may go down to -6 mm of Hgr centimeter of water. Okay, so the pleural, always the pressure, you must remember these things. Okay, always the pressure in pleural cavity is negative. Why it should be negative? Because our lungs have tendency to recoil back. Okay, it has a natural tendency to recoil back, whereas the chest wall has a tendency to expand. So all these two opposite forces create a negative pressure in the pleural cavity. And always in health, okay, in normal lungs, these two forces are equal and opposite. Hence, they keeps the lung and chest wall in a normal shape. Okay, so our lungs has a capacity to recoil back, and our chest wall has a capacity to expand. Okay, so if this pleural cavity is punctured, what happens? Lung will shrink and chest wall will expand. Okay, and it becomes a barrel shape because this negative pressure cannot be maintained. Okay, so this is about the pleural cavity. Okay, and histologically we are having two types of cells, that is type 1 cells and type 2 cells in the alveoli. Type 1 cells, okay, these are the maximum 95% and they help in the exchange of gases. Type 2 cells are only 5%. They are also called as pneumocytes, and they secrete an important chemical called surfactant. Okay, so this surfactant helps in the prevents the collapsing of alveoli at the end of expiration. Okay, so this much, if those cells comes into mind, these things should come into your mind. Okay, so this is the alveolar capillary membrane. It should be very thin, 0.5, and these are the different layers. Okay, so gas has to pass from lungs to here, means it has to go through all these 10 layers. Okay, so nerve supply, you already know it as a supplied by autonomic nervous system. Okay, and very important function of our respiratory system is gaseous exchange, and non-respiratory functions, the lungs has a defense mechanism also. Okay, and the function of pulmonary circulation, or it acts as a reservoir for left ventricle. Okay, and pulmonary circulation acts as a filter. It removes whatever is there in the blood, like small emboli and all those things, and it helps in the drug absorption. Many drugs are given by respiratory route, isn't it? Particularly the anesthetics. And so fluid exchange and drug absorption, our pulmonary circulation will help. And metabolic functions are it synthesize surfactant, prostaglandins and angiotensin converting enzymes. Okay, so these are the some of the functions of our respiratory system. Okay, then I told you about the compliance. What is the definition of compliance of the lung? Yes, what is the definition? Compliance is nothing but it is the distensibility of a lung. Okay, what is the definition? It is there in the slide itself. Yes, what is the definition of compliance of a lung? Anyone? Yes, what is compliance of a lung? No one?
Change in the volume for pressure.
Yeah, unit change in the volume for every unit change in the pressure, isn't it? dV by dP, isn't it? So that is the definition of our compliance or distensibility of a lung. So this experiment they have done in a animals and they have plotted a graph. So when we plot a graph of compliance for each pressure change, they have measured the volume. Then they will get the inspiratory curve and the expiratory curve. So what it indicates? So the pressure volume relationship in our lung is not linear. If it would have been linear, we would have got a straight line, isn't it? So it is not linear. It has a so hysteresis loop. This is called as hysteresis loop because at same pressure, the volume during inspiration is less, whereas the volume during expiration is more, isn't it? So that is the reason we will get this hysteresis curve. Okay, so this is not linear. This much you must remember in this graph. Okay, then static lung compliance and dynamic lung compliance. Static means at rest, means at the end of expiration, when there is no active inspiration and expiration is taking place, lungs are at rest, that is called as static lung compliance. Dynamic means during working. Okay, so during inspiration or expiration, that is called as dynamic lung compliance. Okay, then okay, so let us go to the next slide. So these things you know already. Inspiration is active in mechanics of breathing. So mechanics of breathing is again a main question for you. So it may be asked you for 10 marks. So you have to write here what is the mechanics of inspiration and expiration. So you have to explain the process. So inspiration is a active process, expiration is a passive process. Active process means here actively the muscle contract, inspiratory muscle will contract and the lungs will expand. Okay. So diaphragm is very important inspiratory muscle. So at rest, it is like boom shape. So when it contracts, it comes down and it increases the vertical diameter of our lung. Okay. Then so that what it is seen in this diagram also. Okay. Then you have another two movements. Okay. So what are the muscles of inspiration? One is diaphragm, another one is external intercostal muscles. So external intercostal muscle shows two types of movements, that is the bucket handle movement and the pump handle movement. Okay, so all these things will again increase the transfer and antero-posterior diameter of our chest. Okay, this is a bucket handle movement. It increases usually the transverse diameter, and pump handle movement increases the antero-posterior diameter of our chest. Okay, so this has shown here. So this is the bucket handle movement. Ribs will move up during inspiration, causing increase in the transverse diameter, and this is the pump handle movement with respect to the sternum. Okay, so sternum, the ribs will move. Okay, so our sternum and ribs will move up like a pump handle. They are attached to even the spinal cord. Okay, and it increases the antero-posterior diameter. So these are the mechanics that occurring during inspiration. Okay, one is the contraction of diaphragm increases the vertical diameter, and the bucket handle and pump handle movement of our ribs increases the transverse as well as the vertical diameter of the chest, and lungs will expand, and when volume increases, pressure decreases and air enters into our lung. Okay, that is the mechanics of inspiration. Okay, these are the accessory muscles of respiration. Then expiration is a passive process. Okay, so these are the accessory muscles. Then expiration is a passive process. Only the relaxation of contracted muscle will lead to expiration. Okay, and but in case of forceful expiration, some of the muscle will act. Those are nothing but the abdominal muscles and the internal intercostal muscles. Okay, so the breathing is abdominothoracic in male and thoraco-abdominal in females. Okay, so these are the things which occurs during mechanics of breathing. So if mechanics of breathing comes, this flow chart comes to your mind, and you have to go on expanding these things. Okay, so what are the during inspiration, what all things will occur? So contraction of diaphragm occurs, so this you have to expand. Okay, when contraction occurs, you have to add one or two diagram to show the contraction of diaphragm and increase in the vertical diameter. Then expansion of thoracic cage, intrapleural pressure become more negative. So you can add the pressure change graph also to show during inspiration the intrapleural pressure will go to -6. Increase in transpulmonary pressure, inflation of the lungs, and decrease in alveolar pressure will become. So as the volume increases, pressure decreases. Decrease in pressure which becomes subatmospheric, the pressure goes down. So here you can show what are the pressure in the atmosphere, what are the pressure in the lung. During inspiration, what pressure changes are taking place. That you can show diagrammatically. Then airflow into the airway and inspiration over, then cessation of contraction of inspiratory muscle and inspiration. You understood? So with this flow chart, you should make a whole answer of what are the mechanics during inspiration. Okay. Then during expiration, what happens? Relaxation of inspiratory muscles, drooping of the rib cage, intrapleural pressure become less negative, decrease in transpulmonary pressure, whatever you are written opposite here. Deflation or recoiling of stretched lung, decrease in alveolar diameter, alveolar pressure become greater than atmospheric pressure, air is pushed out of the lungs, and airflow continues until alveolar pressure equal to atmospheric pressure. You understood? So this flow chart you must add in your answers. Okay. Next, these are the pressure changes. Again, this is very important. This may be asked as a very commonly asked 3 marks question. Okay, so this is, as I told you, intrapleural pressure. So it is always negative, isn't it? As I told you, it is always negative. And this is the alveolar pressure. Okay, alveolar pressure is pressure in the alveoli. Okay, so this is the phase of inspiration. This is the phase of expiration. Okay, so at the beginning of inspiration, the pressure in the alveoli is 0, and at the end of inspiration also it is 0. Okay, deep inspiration it goes to -1. Okay, and at expiration, deep expiration, it goes to +1. That's all. That is the change in alveolar pressure occurs. 0 means it is atmospheric pressure. Don't think it is 0. Okay. So it is equal to atmospheric pressure. Okay. Here -1 means it is less than 1 atmospheric pressure. That is 7. How much is the normal atmospheric pressure? Yes. What is the normal atmospheric pressure? Yes, anyone?
760 mmHg.
Yeah, 760. So here it is 760. Here it comes to 759. Again 760. During expiration 761. Okay. So 0 means it is considering with the atmospheric pressure. Okay. So alveolar pressure is always negative. You must remember. It is most of the time it is -2, and deep inspiration it goes to the, it becomes still negative, that is up to -6. It has been shown here. Okay, then during expiration also it does not comes to the positive. Okay, as I told you, intrapleural pressure, it is given here only the pleural pressure, but it is intrapleural pressure. Okay. So this is alveolar pressure, this is the intrapleural pressure, which is always negative. These things you should keep in mind while drawing. Okay, so pressure, this should be always in the negative zone. This is, it changes from -1 to +1. Okay, these are the overall volume changes which occur in our lung. So this inspiration is the upward curve. So volume is goes on increasing during inspiration, and expiration the volume goes on decreasing. Okay. So downstroke is expiration, upstroke is inspiration. You understood? So these are the changes of intrapleural pressure. So difference of these alveolar and pleural pressure is called as transpulmonary pressure. Okay, difference between these two pressure is called as transpulmonary pressure. I hope it is now clear to you. Okay. So now some of the factors which increase, which decrease, you read all those things. Okay. Then now coming on to the next. So I will go to the compliance. So here, this I told you already, isn't it? Tendency of lung to the recoil back always balances with the tendency of the chest wall to recoil in opposite direction. So when it balances, then our lung and chest wall will be normal. Okay. So tendency of lung to recoil is governed by, so how the tendency will come to the lungs? It comes by the recoiling of elastic tissue. Our lung has a elastic tissue. So elastic tissue, suppose rubber, if you stretch, okay, if you leave it, automatically it come back to its original size, isn't it? Like that, that our lung tissue is also having a property of elasticity. Hence, after expansion, always it has a tendency to come back. Okay, so causes the recoiling of lung and surface tension with the alveoli. Okay, so surface tension with the alveoli. So this force, surface tension, which is present in our alveoli, this also tries to bring back the lungs to the normal position. Okay, so the surface tension and elastic tissue helps in recoiling of the lungs. Okay, so you must remember this Laplace law. So what is the Laplace law? Pressure is equal to 2 times the tension divided by the radius. Okay, that means pressure is directly proportional to the tension developed on the wall. So this law is applicable to any hollow spherical structure. Okay, like alveoli, stomach, bladder. Okay, so those are the structures in which this law will helpful. So any hollow spherical structure, pressure is equal to 2 times the tension divided, inversely related to the radius of that structure. Okay, so dP is the distending pressure, okay, T is the tension, and R is the radius. So this I have shown in the next slide properly. So here they have given one example. So if radius is decreases, okay, here radius decreases, here the radius is more. This what occur in inspiration, this occurs in expiration, isn't it? So according to Laplace law, 2t is equal to PR, P is equal to 2t by R. This you can make. Okay. So for the same T, if tension is same in both, then pressure should increase here, isn't it? P1, the pressure is more than the descending pressure is more here compared to the P2. That is 2T by R1 is more than 2T by R2. Okay. So the tension will be more here when the radius will decrease. Okay. So to prevent the collapsing, so if still more radius will decrease, it has a tendency to collapse. Okay. So that collapsing of this is prevented by a chemical substance that is called as surfactant. Okay, it prevents the collapsing of the lung when the diameter will decrease, because here the tension will be more. When diameter is decreased, tension will be very high. P1 is more, so it has a capacity to collapse, and that collapsing is prevented by surfactant. Okay. So this is the application of Laplace law in our alveoli. These things you must remember. So how this surfactant will do that? Okay. So here you can make out the surfactant molecules are attached very near. They are distributed closely here. Whether the surfactant molecules are distributed apart here. Okay. So there is a layer of fluid inside our lungs. Okay, so here there will be air. So junction of fluid and air will create a lot of tension. Okay, so in between this fluid layer which is present inside our alveoli, and here is the lung air. So the junction between fluid and air causes a lot of surface tension. Okay, that tension will be reduced by these surfactant molecules. They will be present between these junction of fluid and air in the alveoli, and they reduce the surface tension. More so in expiration. During expiration, they reduce the surface tension more compared to during inspiration. Okay, inspiration there is not much tension. So here the role of surfactant is during expiration only. Okay. So these things you have to understand very well. Go back today and read your books and make your notes. I think this month and the next month you will be coming. Offline also we can discuss if you have any problem. Then pulmonary surfactant can be asked to you as a short note. So you must write its chemical composition. So it is majorly contain dipalmitoyl phosphatidyl choline. This is the major. It is a mixture of lipids and proteins. Okay, and carbohydrates. And the major lipid which is present is dipalmitoyl phosphatidyl choline. Okay, so some of the diagram to show the how surfactant will help. Okay, so alveoli without surfactant they will collapse. Alveoli with surfactant they are distended even at the during expiration. Okay. So these are some of the diagram to show the importance of our intrapleural pressure. So if saline is injected to the lung of an animal, intrapleural pressure is lost. That time we will not get the normal inspiration and expiration curve as we will get in case of a normal lung with the pleural cavity and minimum amount of fluid in the pleural cavity. Okay. So some of the condition where the surfactant decreases, increases, and here this is very, very important in applied aspect. Whenever the question on surfactant is asked, you must write about hyaline membrane disease or infant respiratory distress syndrome. In that, the surfactant is absent or synthesized very less. Hence, immediately after birth, okay, the lungs, at the end of expiration, there will not be any surfactant, no reduction in the surface tension, hence the alveoli will collapse. Okay, immediately the lung damage occurs and the newborn will go to the respiratory distress. This is called as respiratory distress syndrome. Usually it occurs in premature babies because the lungs are not properly formed and surfactant is not synthesized in the lung. Surfactant is synthesized almost at the 36th week of gestation. So if the baby is born early, 7 months, something like that. Okay. So in premature babies, this is the problem. So if for any complication, they have to conduct the cesarean section at early, then they will give, you might have know this, they will give the steroid, corticosteroid injection to mature the lungs, to form so that the surfactant should be formed in the lungs and the baby should not go for respiratory distress syndrome. You can read this in detail in your books. What is hyaline membrane disease or respiratory, how to prevent this. Okay. So here what happens? Acute disease of the newborn, decreased surfactant, greater the surface tension, harder for the oxygen to get into the blood and lower pulmonary ventilation and respiratory distress will occur. Now, what is compliance? Compliance, as I told you, it is change in lung volume per unit change in airway pressure, and it is the distensibility of the lung. Okay, so it is expressed in liter per centimeter of water. So whenever compliance also can be asked you as a 3 marks, 5 marks, 10 mark question. Okay. So all these topics, maximum questions will come to you in exam. Okay. Hence you have to read it very carefully, make your own notes. Okay. So here you must write the definition of compliance first. Okay. And this is the formula you need, and V is volume of the lung, airway pressure, and this is the difference. Okay. Then the compliance of the lung and chest wall is around 0.13 liter per centimeter of water, whereas the compliance of lung alone is 0.22. That means only lung has more distensibility compared to lung inside the chest wall. Okay. So because chest wall will provide some resistance for expansion, isn't it? So but lung, if lung is alone, okay, outside the chest wall, it can expand easily compared to when lung is in the chest. Okay, so that is the meaning of these, and these are the normal values. Okay, now, so this is due to, as I told you, presence of elastic tissue and presence of the surface tension. So elastic forces of the fluid that lines the inside wall of alveoli and other lung air spaces. So compliance or distensibility is because of presence of the elastic tissues, and they are having a very peculiar arrangement in our lungs. Okay, and these elastic fibers are like that, individually they cannot be expanded, but as a whole, like our socks which we wear in our foot, okay, inside our shoes, socks can be expanded whole. Okay, each fiber cannot be expanded. Okay, so like that arrangement we will get in our lungs. So the whole lung tissue can be expanded, not each fiber. So that special arrangement of elastic tissue is present in our lung. Okay, and we have a surface. As I told you, there is a fluid inside the lining of our alveoli that leads to a tension. Okay, that increases the tension between the junction of fluid and lung. Okay, so surfactant will reduce the tension. Okay, and that surface tension is again a recoiling force. It tries to collapse the lung. Okay, So these two forces help in recoiling of lung. Okay, so this is already I told you. Compliance curve, we have two different curves according to different phases of respiration. These curves are called as inspiratory compliance curve and this is called as expiratory compliance curve. Okay, it shows the capacity of lung to adapt to small change in transpulmonary pressure. So small change in transpulmonary pressure, how much change in the volume. So our lung, so this curve shows the adaptability, how much our lung can be expanded with small change in our pressure. That can be shown by this compliance curve. Compliance is seen at low volumes because of difficulty with initial lung inflation and at high volume because of the limit of chest wall for expansion. Okay, so compliance is very important at the beginning and at the end, it means to say, because at the beginning, because difficulty with initial lung inflations. Okay, initially to inflate lung it takes some time, but afterward it can be easily inflated. Okay, at the end also, because maximum capacity, if it has already expanded, then it cannot be expanded, isn't it? So that is the limit. Within physiological limit it can be expanded. Okay, so these are the compliance curve. So this is now, if it is a normal compliance curve, fibrosis shrinkage of lung occurs. So in this the curve will shift to the right. Okay, compliance curve will shift to the right. Emphysema here, abnormally large alveoli will get. Okay, so expanded alveoli, hence they will lose their elasticity here. They are more expanded but they will lose their elasticity in emphysema. In this case our compliance curve will shift to the right. Okay, so here it is shift to the right means it has lost, our lung tissue has lost the elasticity and the alveoli are abnormally expanded or large here. Fibrosis means it has too much shrinkage. Okay, here also the distensibility or compliance is very less. Okay, so compliance is equal to this, always you must remember, change in pressure for every unit change in volume for every unit change in pressure. This is compliance. Okay, always you remember these things. Okay, then compliance of thorax and lung together. How to measure compliance of lung and thorax? Okay, so this is our normal compliance curve. Okay, so what is A? This is the chest cage and combined chest lung cage. Okay, so this is C. So B is lung, A is chest. So this is only the chest, this is only the lung. Only lung has more distensibility compared to the chest. So both together, if actually this is occurring in our body, okay, our lung is expanding along with the chest wall. So this is our normal compliance curve, that is lung inside the chest. Okay, so compliance of whole system is measured while expanding lungs of totally relaxed or paralyzed person. So compliance is always measured during static conditions. Okay, air is forced into the lung a little at a time while recording lung pressure and volume. So air is force. Okay, little amount of air is taken by spirometry and change in pressure will be recorded. Like that these graphs have been drawn. The compliance of the lung plus thoracic wall is equal to half of the lung alone. This I told you already, because chest will give some resistance for expansion. While lungs are expanded to high volumes or compressed to lung volumes. Okay, then limitation of chest wall increases. Compliance of system is less than 1/5. Okay, so now coming on to one more diagram of same thing. Here the setup is shown. Okay, which spirometer person is taking and some pressure measuring device is attached here. So each change in volume, what is the pressure change will be taken here, and after that this graph has been plotted. Okay, so this is about the compliance curves. Very much detail is not needed. What I told you, this is enough for you while writing your answer. Okay, so if you can draw this also, it is well and good, otherwise no problem. Okay, so it has what has shown in this compliance curve. So this is normal. Okay, so at zero pressure. So at zero pressure, so what is this vital capacity percentage? At zero pressure, it is around 30% of vital capacity, isn't it? Volume is around 30% of vital capacity. Okay, so if pressure increases, what happens? Okay, if pressure increases to plus 30, okay, then this will increase to 100%. Vital capacity will increase to 100%. If pressure decreases, okay, airway pressure decreases to minus 30, then what happens? Okay, so this will come back, percentage of vital capacity decreases, isn't it? That's what this graph is shown. Okay, and only chest wall and lung is not needed. If you draw only this graph, that is along with the lung plus chest wall, and explain these things, that's enough. So at rest, we will start expiring at the level of FRC, that is functional residual capacity. At this percentage of vital capacity, the pressure will be zero. Zero means equal to atmospheric pressure in our lungs. Okay, that is the meaning of this graph. Now, factors affecting only the lung compliance. What are the factors which affect the lung compliance? Lung volume, individual with only one lung, phases of respiratory cycle, effect of gravity and surface tension. Okay, then what is specific compliance? That is compliance divided by functional residual capacity. So in children, functional residual capacity will be less. Okay, so if you measure only compliance, that may be shown less, but the distensibility is normal in the children. So to avoid those things, specific compliance can be recorded. This will give you compliance per functional residual capacity. Okay. Then how to measure the pressure volume curve of the lung? Only lung compliance here. So this is the thing to measure the compliance of both lung and chest wall. Okay. So here this setup is for only to the lung compliance. How to measure the lung compliance? Okay. So how it has been measured? Intrapleural pressure is equal to intraesophageal pressure. So directly measuring intrapleural pressure is not possible. You have to puncture the pleural cavity, and that is dangerous. So usually in our chest, intrapleural pressure is equal to intraesophageal pressure. Hence most of the time of each change in the pressure volume, the intraesophageal pressure. So pressure recording device can be easily kept on the lower end of the esophagus. It will be passed through the mouth and it is kept in the lower esophagus. For each change in the volume, the change in intraesophageal pressure can be measured. That is equal to intrapleural pressure. Okay. So what is the compliance clinical significance of this? So where we'll get the higher, this is not competence compliance. Okay. So in old age, emphysema, static and increases, and low in case of apex of the lung if surfactant is absent. Okay, and the acute respiratory distress syndrome, pulmonary fibrosis, interstitial lung. In those conditions, compliance will be less. So what is the summary till now? What I told you? So what is compliance? Change in lung volume per unit change in the pressure. Okay. Compliance diagram of the lung, there are two different curves. Okay. Show the capacity of lung to adapt to small change in the transpulmonary pressure. Compliance of the lung occur due to elastic forces, tissue elastic forces and fluid air surface tension elastic forces in alveoli, fluid air surface tension elastic forces. So alveoli tend to collapse, but they don't because of the presence of surfactant. Okay, it reduces the surface tension. Surfactant has this, especially the phospholipids, dipalmityl phosphatidylcholine. Okay. So smaller alveoli have greater tendency to collapse. That's what happens in expiration, and that is prevented by surfactant. Okay. So these things are no problem, not so very important. These things is important to understand the physics which is occurring in our lungs. Okay. You can read on your own if you want. But exam point of view, these are not so important, but this is important. What is alveolar ventilation? Okay, alveolar, this may be asked you as a short note, 3 marks question. Okay, so it is the amount of air ventilating the alveoli per minute. That is the definition of alveolar ventilation. So alveolar ventilation is equal to tidal volume minus dead space into respiratory rate. So this formula you must remember. So normally tidal volume is 500. Tidal volume is nothing but the amount of air inspired and expired, isn't it? So 500 ml minus normally the dead space normally is 150. That is equal to an atomical dead space into normal respiratory rate is 12. So if you calculate all those things, it comes to 4.2 liters per minute. So this is the normal alveolar ventilation. Okay. So in rapid shallow breathing, if breathing is rapid and shallow, then alveolar ventilation decreases. In slow, if the breathing is slow and deep, alveolar ventilation increases. Okay. So dead space is again a short note for you people, very commonly asked. So as I told you, amount of air in the respiratory tract which does not take part in exchange. So anatomical dead space is from nose to the terminal bronchioles, normal is around 150 ml. Physiological dead space in healthy subject, this should be equal. Anatomical dead space is equal to physiological dead space. But in some pathology, physiological dead space will be present. So variation, age and sex, this may be dead space will be more in males compared to the females, and pathologically emphysema, bronchiectasis and pulmonary embolism, in this the dead space will increase. Okay, even though the gas oxygen is there, but exchange will not taking place properly here. Okay, so here in this diagram it is shown no gas exchange. Okay, even though the gas is there, but there is no blood supply. Hence, if the air is there, but there is no blood supply, then it is of no use. No gas exchange, and this whole thing will come under physiological dead space. Okay, even though air is there, but no exchange is taking place. Okay, so here what happens? This is the alveolar ventilation. Pulmonary blood flow. So if there is a ventilation is also there, blood flow is also normal, then exchange will occur normally. Okay. So in health, anatomical dead space represent the entire dead space volume. In people with lung disease, some alveoli do not get blood supply. Such alveoli do not participate in the gas exchange. They constitute alveolar dead space. Okay, or physiological. You can draw this diagram and show some of the alveoli, they are blocked. Okay, and they are not taking part in the exchange. Okay. How you measure dead space? So you can measure direct process and indirect process of measuring dead space is there. So in direct expired air volume into carbon dioxide percentage in the alveolar air minus carbon dioxide percentage in the expired air divided by carbon dioxide percentage in alveolar air. You have to by heart these formulas. There is no other way. This is the formula with which you can calculate the dead space. Indirect method by single breath oxygen technique. You must remember at least this method also. Single breath oxygen technique. Okay. So you people read this in detail. So in this graph, the area which is present in A1 and A2, this constitute the dead space. Okay, you read the detail in your textbook. If you have any problem, we will discuss. Okay, so area A1 is equal to A2 and this constitute the dead space. Okay. Now, this is also very important question. That is ventilation perfusion ratio, very commonly asked short note for you people. Okay, so this is nothing but it is the ratio of alveolar ventilation to pulmonary blood flow. So normal alveolar ventilation as we calculated is 4.2, isn't it? So 4 liters per minute if you take, and normal pulmonary blood flow is 5 liters per minute. So 4 by 5, normally it is 0.8. You cannot forget this at any time. What is the normal V by P ratio? It is 0.8. Okay, so factors affecting V by P ratio. So effect of gravity. In apex, the V by P ratio is 3.4, whereas in basal condition, in base of the lungs, V by P ratio is less. That is shown in this diagram. So alveolar ventilation, it goes on increasing from up to the down. So upper zone of the lung, it is around 2 liters per minute. In the middle, it is 4 liters per minute. In the lower zone, the ventilation is around 6.5 liters per minute. Whereas the blood flow also increases from up to the down, but here it is 0.5 and in the middle it is 5 and lower. So it is too much increase here. Blood flow is very much increased compared to the alveolar ventilation. Hence the ratio goes on decreasing. So here it is 3.4 in the apex of the lung. So it becomes 0.8 correct here. Okay, in the middle of the lung and in the lower part, that is the basal part, the ratio becomes 0.63 because here the blood flow has enormously increased but ventilation has not that much increased, hence the ratio will decrease. Okay, so this is the normal V by P ratio in our lungs. Okay, so this example will give you the importance, how much important these alveolar ventilation and blood flow are. So these two are very good example to understand the function of alveolar ventilation and pulmonary blood flow. Suppose in example A, what happens? Alveolar ventilation in the left lung is normal, right lung is 0. Okay, blood flow, right lung is normal, that is 5 liters per minute, but left lung is 0. But whatever the thing, V by P ratio is 0 here. Okay, 0 by anything is 0 and something divided by 0 is infinity, isn't it? Both the things are not good for our lungs. So our lung need normal alveolar ventilation and normal blood flow, then only the proper exchange of gases will takes place. But if you calculate total V by P ratio, okay, of both the lungs, it will be normal only 0.8. So being V by P ratio normal 0.8 is not important. It is important that it should be normal in both the lungs. Okay, both the lungs it should be 0.8, 0.8 and finally also it should be 0.8. Then only our lungs are working normally. In example 2, what has happened? Alveolar ventilation is okay, but in the left lung it has reduced. Okay, but blood flow is normal in both. So if ventilation is increased in the right lung, the V by P ratio is more than normal. Okay, here the ventilation is decreased, the blood supply is more common for both, equal for both. But here the V by P ratio has decreased. But altogether, if you take both the lungs, okay, it is 4 by 5, that is equal to 0.5. Okay, so if together you measure it, but still there is some derangement going on, but total V by P ratio will be normal. Okay, so these things you have to remember, that is uniformity of V by P ratio is very important compared to just the normal V by P ratio. You understood this point? So measure physiological anatomical dead space. So how to measure the uniformity of V by P ratio? So you have to measure anatomical and physiological dead space. If physiological dead space is more than anatomical dead space, means there is non-uniformity. If it is equal, means there is a uniformity of V by P ratio. Okay, there must be alveoli with high V by P ratio. And if you measure the carbon dioxide content of the expired air, then only you can, then also you can make out whether V by P ratio is uniform or not. So at the beginning of expiration, this should be more. At the end of expiration, carbon dioxide level should be less. If carbon dioxide level is more at the end of expiration also, that indicates that V by P ratio is not uniform. Okay, so these are the conditions. Now I'll stop. I think you are having the next class. So still, if you have any more doubts, we can clarify in the offline. Okay.
Thank you, ma'am.
Okay. Is it helpful to you? Revision class?
Thank you, ma'am. It was useful.
Yeah, you understood some of the points today?
Ma'am.
Okay.
Got an oversight.
Yeah, so if you have any other doubts also, you can just mail me or ask me. Otherwise, you note down your doubts. We can discuss in the offline classes. Okay. Our tutorials are during offline classes we can discuss. Okay. Thank you.